Taylor was here, he had been here for 4 years, so he knew where all the stuff and where all the stuff. Jamie probably don't know just because we haven't been here for but I bet we do. We probably do have one somewhere. For as many times as we've done it. Yeah, she has training. It's the funny is it's VCU training, but it trains there.
Worst places to be in the state.
Yeah, yeah. Because at first I was like, what are we doing? Because I knew it was for VCU or it was out of VCU. I assumed it was at VCU, and then I realized, oh, it's not at VCU. I probably was less than knowing.
Stan's not a bad place to be.
Yeah, yeah. I haven't met this time. We're about to get started, everyone. You good? Okay. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the High Bridge State Park Trail Master Plan. It's the information meeting, and we'll be talking a minute about that, but I'm excited to be here tonight. My name is Kelly McClary. I am the Director of Planning and Recreation Resources with the Department of Conservation and Recreation. Here with me tonight is Daniel Jordan, Park Manager. Daniel?
I'm right here.
Tim Schrader, Eastern Field Operation Manager. Josh Bateman, Planning and Resource Manager for Planning and Recreation Resources. David Bryan, State Parks Planner. Bryce Wilk, District Manager. And Carrie O'Neill, District 4 Specialist. Thank you all for attending tonight. So this is the first public meeting. There'll be more, just so you know, but this is the first public meeting for the master plan process. Our process usually takes from 12 to 18 months. There'll be multiple meetings along the way. This is the very first meeting. The difference from this meeting and the next one, this is the information meeting. So you see some information right here in front of you. That's just the visual of the trail and what it looks like today. What you're going to hear about tonight is the park background, park purpose. You'll hear some things about cultural, natural, historic resources of the park. So it's really focused on giving you all the background that we know today for the park. After tonight and tonight as well, you'll have a chance to ask questions, comments, and then after tonight, you'll also have 30 days to give us comments just on this meeting. In the future, probably a few months from now, we'll have another meeting, and that will be called the public comment meeting. And in that meeting, we'll show you proposed changes, we'll show you proposed facilities that we plan to do, and you'll also have a chance to comment on that meeting and then have a 30-day comment period as well. At the end of the process, we always have a Board of Conservation and Recreation meeting. It cultivates, that's also a public meeting, and you all would be invited to that as well. So there's 3 public meetings that you'll have a chance to comment. So if you forget to comment tonight, there's no problem. We'll have more time to do so. So with that said, I'm going to get started, and I'm going to turn it over to Josh Bateman.
Thanks, Kelly. Thank you for attending tonight. Welcome to High Bridge State Park, or the Town of Farmville Town Office, at least temporarily. It's a pleasure to be here this evening. I just want to go through a few housekeeping items before we start. So please mute your phones. If you have questions, you're going to be presented a lot of information this evening. This park is really a treasure trove of natural and particularly cultural resources, so there's a lot of information to go over tonight. If you have questions on any of that, or if you have questions that you have on the needs of this park and what kinds of things that you think the park needs, if you save that to the end of the presentation is going to take a little while to get through, but once we get through it, I promise there'll be a robust question and answer session. So we won't be going to the 3-minute timer. We're not going to limit you to just a comment in 3 minutes. You can ask questions, you can issue comments if you'd like. There is a public input survey that is currently available for the public to take. At the end of the presentation, there will be a QR code so folks can actually scan that directly and go and take the survey at your leisure. But this is the actual web address. It's the Your Comments Count public input survey at that web address. And these meeting materials, including the recording of this presentation as well as the PowerPoint, will be made available to the public following the meeting on the High Bridge Trail Master Plan website. and that it can be obtained. That can be gotten to by following that link right there to master plans and just going to the High Bridge Trail master plan. So tonight's agenda is a fairly robust one. We're going to start with the welcome to Virginia State Parks by Dr. Melissa Baker, the State Parks Director. The Park Manager, Daniel Jordan, is going to talk about just welcome everybody to the state park and give an overview of the state park before we're going to jump into the purpose of this meeting and sort of the master plan process and where this meeting fits into that process. I'll talk about that a little bit. And then I'll hand it off to our state parks planner with the Division of State Parks, David Bryan, who is going to present a lot of information about the park's resources and existing facilities. He'll give it back to me so I can provide you with more specific information about how to take that public input survey before we wrap up with a question and answer session. So at this time, I'm going to hand it off to Melissa Baker with Virginia State Parks.
So this is the most dangerous and fear-inducing part of the meeting for our folks because I have one slide and no script. But I promise I'll be brief. Maybe you can put on the 3 minutes for me. Good evening, everyone. I just want to take the opportunity to welcome you and thank you all for being here. It's good to see familiar faces. Many of you I have met. Because you're very active with the trail and with the park. And so it's good to see all of you. As many of you know, Virginia State Parks has 43 state parks. So High Bridge Trail State Park is one of 43 state parks in the system. And I know that they're going to talk a little bit about the planning process and how planning works in state parks, so I'm going to not spend a lot of time on that. But what I do want to touch on is just the importance of you all being here. Many of you have been highly involved in aspects of the trail, in management of the park, in partnership with the park already. And so I appreciate you being here to continue to be in partnership with the park. As we go into master planning, our master plans are 30-year plans, and we look at them every 10 years. And we're really at the very beginning of that process. So as we go through this conversation today, the folks here are going to tell you about the park, what we know about the park, and then ask you for your input on what you would like to see in the park. And so I thank you for giving up your evening, your time with family. You probably had the same poor supper I did. Which came through the car window. So thank you for giving your time to us today as we go through this process. We really are setting the stage for the next 30 years of High Bridge Trail State Park. That's not to say that we won't revisit it, because we do revisit master plans every 10 years. But as we go through this conversation, we'll be taking that 30-year look. So it'll be a couple hours in the room today, but it really will have a long impact on the park and the communities that depend on the park. So thank you for being here. And with that, I am going to turn it over to Daniel Johnson. Many of you know Daniel Johnson, the park manager of High Bridge Trail State Park. Jordan. Did I say Daniel Johnson? Only twice. Thanks for coming down.
I had a feeling it was for me. So, well, hello, I'm Daniel. Yeah, it's good. So I'm Daniel Jordan. I will answer to just about anything. So, but great to have you all out here. A couple things before I start. I want to thank Craig Guthrie as our chief ranger. He's been here since the beginning of the park, and so Craig, thanks for all that you do. And next to him is Jody, our office manager. She helps my dreams either become a reality, or we will find out that we'll run out of money if we do them. So I appreciate you. And then Carrie is our natural resource specialist. And so we appreciate all the staff. We also appreciate the Friends group being here. So Regina is our president. We have a very robust Friends group that comes alongside the park and again goes along with some crazy ideas. But we've done a lot in the last couple of years. And then Sarah with the town of Pamplin, thank you. And so we're glad to finally be in Pamplin. Yeah. And thank you all for being here and being part of this process. So I'm here before you as just the liaison of Highbridge Trail. This is your park. It's not my park. And so I'm really glad to hear the input and see the interest in it because we're here to serve the public. And so, but before we talk about the park, just so you know, kind of my background is I've been here for 9 years, and I've been in Virginia State Parks over 16, and I've been in Parks and Rec for 30 years. So I started when I was 14, and my parents let me get a job before I was in high school. So, and before I came to Highbridge, I'd been in a myriad of different parks across Virginia and Alabama, and I'd never been to a Civil War park or a railroad trail, and Highbridge has marked both of those off. So at Highbridge, we have 64 miles of neighbors, and I really enjoy having 64 miles of neighbors. It can be stressful at times, but I get a lot done in the grocery store and you know, on people's coffee tables. And thankfully, I have a family that understands that if I'm just going to run and get the mail, they'll see me in an hour, and this is usually how it works. But it is good to be here. So with that, please know that I'm available to you. I'm in and around town. I'll be happy to give you my number. Call me anytime. And my door's always open, but also I make my rounds on a regular basis. And so, but I'm glad to have you all here. So a couple things about Highbridge. I'll look at one of the screens. So we're actually we started as a 31.2 mile long park. And so if you step back in time, you look at the town of Farmville, they, in the 1850s, the railroad was going to go from Petersburg to Lynchburg. And what's the quickest way between 2 points? Straight line. There you go. So if you look at Highbridge Trail, it is not a straight line. Right here in front of you, it looks like a worm going around. Well, there's good reason for that. In the 1850s, the residents of Farmville said, a railroad is going to be a game changer for goods and service and commerce for this area. Because at the time, they're relying on carriages and bateau boats, and they're not reliable with, you know, roads not being great, the river fluctuates. And so even nowadays, it's hard to float the Appomattox River. Am I right, Ian? So the residents of Farmville petitioned Southside Railroad to build build the future trail, build the rail through Farmville. And they said, we'll do that if you raise $100,000. Well, I don't know about you, but $100,000 is a good amount of money to me today. But back in the 1850s, if you pull out your inflation calculator, it's about $3.5 million. And so they said, all right, we'll do that. So that's why at Burkeville, the trail heads north, and then as it passes River Road in Cumberland, it makes a curve west into Farmville, is because the residents changed the course of the railroad, and it changed the course of Farmville for the better, I think. Now, the original bridge was $167,000, which was $5.5 million in today's dollars. Good luck seeing a rail bridge built for $5.5 million today. But it happened. And so in 1854, the rail opened. And so for the rest of the years, the rail ran, and the new bridge was built in 1914 to accommodate heavier and longer trains. But in 1916, they built the Belt Line, which is an active line today. It starts in Pamplin, right? Everything starts in Pamplin. So, and bypasses Farmville into Burkeville. So the remaining part of the 1900s, you have less and less traffic in Farmville. And in the early 80s, Norfolk Western is no longer a railroad company, Norfolk Southern is. And so for the 80s and 90s, they said, man, that's an expensive bridge to maintain for 4 customers in Farmville. And so the last train rolled across the bridge in 2005. And because that bridge is over navigable water, it has to be either maintained or tore down. And so the community got together and they pushed for this to become a park. And so that's why we're here today. So the initial donation was 31.2 miles. And there was a mile on each end that was held back. And so in 2006, it was abandoned. 2007, construction began, and they built miles and opened miles all the way till they got to High Bridge. And so in 2011 to 2012, construction on High Bridge took place. I think Ian might have had a hand in that. And so in 2012, April 2012, the 31.2 miles of High Bridge Trail opened. And we always had the desire for the mile into Pamplin and the mile into Burkeville. Well, this March, Pamplin became a reality. And so now we're 32.2 miles. And so that's been a wonderful partnership, and we're grateful for the town and the counties working together. And we also got an RTP grant to actually finish the trail. So this has become a 32.2 mile long premier trail for bicyclists, for hiking, for walkers, for horseback riders. And so we're seeing all sorts of users come out here, and it's been really neat to see. And Regina's favorite thing, running. We've gotten into races, so we hold about 10 races here. We do several running races. We do one gravel grind, but we've gotten into ultra marathons. And so I know there's some runners on the front row. I don't run races, I run races. So, but it's, there you go, thank you. So we have these races that come in, and this, like last December, we had the fastest 50K at 3 hours and 1 minute. I think he had wheels under his feet. And the fastest 100K for the trail was 8 hours, 24 minutes, which is blazing fast. It was the 8th fastest and 11th fastest time in the U.S. last year. And the race director called and said, hey, we need to get this thing advertised because people are coming. So what we see is High Bridge is an economic engine for this community. It brings outside dollars in. We have people coming from all over the U.S. to run races. We also have people coming into the university here, or we're close to Richmond or close to Appomattox. And so it's really been neat to see the diverse user group that we have here. And also when COVID hit, we didn't close. We had the facilities that we could stay open, and so we could provide a service for people. And so, so we're really excited about what we can be for this community. Where we are now is we not only this year we opened the Mile into Pamplin, but we also have our new visitor center. So thank you all so much for the support on that. Long time coming, and it's a lot of work to get it done. And so we have the building, and we are going to hopefully be opening it by the end of this year. So, so there's a lot going on in this park, and we're not just High Bridge. We're much more, and the hope and part of the process with you all tonight is how can High Bridge be a string of pearls? What is it about Burkeville? What is it about Rice, about the bridge, about the town, about Prospect, about Pamplin that is unique and special that we can be more than just a bridge? And so and especially with the advent of e-bikes, we're seeing more people reach out on the far ends of the park, and so it's been really neat to see. So I believe that I've hit everything. On this slide, the three major areas, Rochelle, which is a mile from downtown going east. It's a mountain bike multi-use trails in there. Camp Paradise, we have trails around the fort there, the earthworks. We also have trails underneath the bridge and the old spur line with the visitor center. And then Piney Grove is on the far east side. That's an undeveloped area of the park that it's a tract of land that we have that could be used for future development. So, so that is who we are as a park. If you're curious of acreage, we're 1,236 acres at this juncture. All the way from Burkeville to Pamplin. So, and then when the master plan took place, over 10 years ago, this was the park purpose that was developed. It was to promote a premier non-motorized share use path for pedestrians, bicyclists, and horseback riders. So, and that's what we've become. We are non-motorized outside of some ADA, and we do allow class 1 and 2 e-bikes now. We don't allow anything else. But I think we've lived up to that purpose, is that it is a premier trail. And it's nice and flat. It's a 0.3% grade the whole way. People tell me it's uphill both ways, but it's 0.3. So, so that is something that we're looking at. Is this the park purpose that we are? So, and then last thing is the goals and the purpose of the meeting is, we've introduced attendees, introduced attendees to the park and master plan process, learn about the park resources, and provide the public with opportunity to ask questions. And again, this is your park. We want to know what you think. And, the way I've always looked at it is you all have more eyes than I do. And like, we want to know what users want. And so how do we work together in that collaborative process? So thank you all for coming out. I will be here all night. I'll be here for probably eons. So let me know if you have any questions, and I'll be happy to answer them. And if you where Josh pointed you all to the website, if you have questions about how to navigate it or whatever, let me know. I'll be happy to do whatever I can to help you out. So, all right. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Daniel. Appreciate that. It's hard to follow on that, but just to sort of reiterate what Daniel said, this is really a great opportunity for the public to learn about this park and learn about the park's resources. It occurs to me that High Bridge Trail, much like the railroad that preceded it, kind of connects these communities in Central Virginia together, both for recreation purposes, but also potentially for economic purposes in the future. But just to sort of talk about the planning process and where all this fits in with the planning process, all planning is really about a very simple set of questions. And in this case, the questions are, what do we have now in the park or in the whatever area or community you're planning? What do we need? What does the public need? In the case of state park master planning, we're talking about what are the recreational needs of users? Are more users using e-bikes? Are more of our users traveling on foot or recreating on foot? Are overnight accommodations desired? So the park's needs are very much at the center, at the heart really of the master planning process. And then the plan identifies how do we get there? What do we need? And then how do we get there with the staffing and the funding, and how much time is it going to take? What are the priorities? Because you can't do everything all at once. It takes many, many years to develop a park, as we've seen from Daniel's portion of the presentation, from when the property is first acquired to when the park reaches a fully developed condition. And if you look at this planning process, in many ways, we are at the end of the what do we have phase and getting into the what do we need portion of the process. So the first few steps that have occurred before tonight are the pre-planning, the internal kickoff, and the evaluation of existing conditions. So those reports have been prepared as far as the cultural and natural resources. And we're at the public information meeting where it's time to present that information that we found out to you all, the public, so that we can start the conversation through the public input survey in terms of what does this park really need? What are y'all's experiences with the park, and what kinds of things would make your experience better or enhance your experience? There's going to be another opportunity at the end of this process here to do the public comment meeting. So after we engage in the visitor experience exercise and the needs assessment and take the results of the survey and put them to the needs assessment, what we'll do is we'll crank out a development plan for this park that is a 30-year build-out development plan for the park. Now, even though it's a 30-year build-out, conditions change, things change. We see that all the time in our society. So the state law actually requires that the state park master plans be updated at least every 10 years. So that's what keeps the park plan fresh. That's what makes the park plan able to respond to new developments, new trends in outdoor recreation, or changing needs as expressed by the community that the park is located in. But that's where we are today, is in the public information meeting, and an opportunity for you not only to learn about the park's resources, but also comment on what you feel is most needed at this particular park. The goal of the whole master planning process, because we're driven by goals, is to create an ambitious but achievable phase development plan for High Bridge Park that incorporates your public input, is consistent with the visitor experience themes and objectives, because what we'll do is we'll take all those survey responses we get. Some of the questions are open-ended and give you an opportunity to just narrate and tell us what you like about the park and what you feel that the park needs. And we'll internally go over that information and develop who our audiences are, who the user groups are, what the different needs and expectations of different user groups before we identify, does the mission statement, for instance, need to be changed? What are the main themes that visitors are coming to the park to explore? So that's also going to be guided by where the resources are located. There's some resources where we want to create interpretive signage and programming around. And then there's other resources like natural resources that we kind of want to leave alone and don't want to call the public's attention to where they're specifically located, even as we teach them at the visitor center through the exhibits and things like that, that these resources do exist in the park. And then this is all meant to move us towards a master plan that you all will have an opportunity to comment on the final recommendations for, as well as comment on the draft master plan when that comes out. And the whole process does take about 18 months or so. So be looking at at DCR's Facebook posts as well as DCR's media pushes for information about that, and also check back frequently with the High Bridge Trail Master Plan website. It's not terribly built out right now, but we're going to put more and more information and ramp up the information that's on the High Bridge Trail Master Plan webpage as we move forward. At this time, I'm going to hand off the presentation off to David Bryan. He is the State Parks Planner. He is my counterpart, my right-hand person when it comes to planning state parks, and he's going to tell you about the park's resources.
Thanks so much, Josh. Good to see everyone tonight. Thanks to the public for coming out. Thanks to the staff for being here. So my name is David Bryan. I'm State Parks Planner for Virginia State Parks as part of our resource management team. So I work with a team of folks that specialize in natural, cultural, and physical resources, and we're going to hit a bit of that tonight. So in planning, resources really lead the way, and that's sort of for our public information meeting tonight. It's going to be our main focus. Is what is currently at the park, what makes this park special and distinct and unique. We have 43 state parks across the system right now. Each one has their own resources, their own stories. What about High Bridge Trail State Park? So we'll get into it, and then as Josh mentioned, this will help us develop our visitor experience goals and eventually our development goals for the park. So again, thanks for being here. All right, and so we're going to go in the order of physical resources first. What's presently here at the park, what can you see up and down High Bridge Trail State Park? Then we'll get into cultural resources, sort of give some perspectives on the past. Daniel touched on it a little bit, and so we'll add a little bit to that, and then get into our natural resources as well. All right, so first into our physical resources. So up and down the trail, there's roughly about 10 different hubs, what I'm going to call hubs, up and down. So starting in the west, you got Pamplin, Elam, Prospect, Tuggle, 3rd Street, River Road, Camp Paradise, Rice, Moran, and Orchard Road. Those are our 10 different areas where guests come in to park, and some of those have full facilities, such as at Camp Paradise. Some of those might just be a small gravel lot. Some have various places to park your bicycle. Some have restrooms, some have vault toilets. It varies. And so one of the things that we'll look at throughout this plan is, again, what do we want each of those stops to be? And actually, a past master plan, they were called whistle stops, sort of thinking about the train going up and down. So what do we want each of those to be in time? Of course, the town of Farmville, also with all of its municipal lots and so forth, has definitely been a major hub for the park in the past. The goal, of course, I skipped ahead of myself. The goal really is to have a multitude of what I'm going to call choose your own adventure up and down the park. So we do have individuals that come to visit the park that want to bike or walk, hike, run, whatever, the entire thing. And so they might start in Pamplin, they might go all the way to Burkeville or vice versa. But the majority of the visitors don't do that. They might do a little bit of a section hike, might go from one parking lot to another and back. Maybe they drop a car, and that happens a lot. The major area that gets covered is between Camp Paradise and Farmville. That's sort of the heaviest traffic is in that section. A lot of folks want to come into Camp Paradise to see the bridge. A lot of college students, of course, are here in Farmville and can explore the park out from here. All right. Daniel mentioned it earlier. There are some areas of the park which may not be quite as familiar to those who are, just staying on the trail itself. That we do have a lot of some hiking trails, some mountain biking trails. So Rochelle, which was mentioned earlier, is one of those. So that's, again, a mile or so east of Farmville. If you head east of Farmville, you just come down here and head that way. If you want a more of a mountain biking adventure and not your traditional biking down the trail, that's where it'd send you. The town of Farmville is a major hub, as mentioned earlier, and that is where a lot of folks are interacting with the trail. That's where they're seeing, a lot of the park-related infrastructure out there. That's where we have a lot of the outfitters currently, and so again, in time, we'd like to see that expand. Where Farmville's been a great partner, but we know we have Pamplin here tonight, and then we have other towns all the way to Burkeville. So how can we improve the park to best serve all of our communities, all of our visitors, those that are local as well as those that are coming in from afar? All right, Camp Paradise, the Trail Center was mentioned, so I'm not going to hit that again, but we are excited that that's going to be opening soon to the public. Additionally, though, in Camp Paradise, that's where our nature play area is. So if you have kids, you can stop there and enjoy that area. There's a lot of trails around Camp Paradise. We have the earthworks from the Civil War era remnants, so we'll talk a little bit about that. And of course, that's the best way to reach the actual High Bridge. Piney Grove. Piney Grove is a little bit lesser known. It's further east. Currently, it is relatively undeveloped. There is a vault toilet along the trail, but the interior of that area really doesn't have much infrastructure at all. There is currently one of our park residences for our chief ranger there, but otherwise, it remains to be seen what will happen there. And that's part of the purpose of this master plan, is talking about that future. Other physical resources. Well, obviously the High Bridge itself is very important, is very popular. We actually have 5 other bridges that the trail crosses, and one of those is owned by VDOT. That's the one that goes over US 460, but the other ones are managed by the park. Culverts. I bring this up. This is not something we usually bring up in master plan meetings, but when you're managing a rail-to-trail park, culverts are very important, and there's 94 of them up and down the trail. Culverts are what allow water to pass from one side of the trail to the other in a theoretically a safe and efficient manner. If a culvert goes out, it causes major disruption to the trail and the trail experience. So while we're going through this process, that's something we want to keep in mind, is our culverts, the state of our culverts, what needs to be maintained, what may need to be replaced, and that type of thing. Ranger residences, I mentioned the one at Piney Grove. We also have one towards Prospect, as well as Park Manager Daniel Jordan's house on Gates Farm Lane. So we have 3 residences associated with the park. And then, of course, we have the old office space at Green Bay and our maintenance complex down near Green Bay. All right, I'm going to transition a little bit into our cultural resources. So I focused primarily on what was here presently. Well, what was here in the past? So going all the way, I'm going to start pre-contact, so pre-1607. Most of this area between what is currently Pamplin to Burkeville was inhabited by Siouan-speaking people. So different from the Algonquin-speaking tribes that were in the eastern portion of Virginia, mostly Siouan-speaking here. That included the Monacan, the Saponi, and the Appomattox tribes. And as I understand it, this was really a mixed area, so to speak, where a lot of their tribal boundaries overlapped. It was a very agricultural society. You may have heard of the 3 sisters before, or corn, bean, and squash. Those were the 3 main crops that sort of kept them going, as well as, of course, hunting for wild game, deer, turkey, and so forth. Today, we do know of at least one Native American archaeological site that's located in the Camp Paradise area of the park. And there's several others that are located near the trail, but not actually within our borders. But they give good evidence, again, of the presence of these various tribes. And I'm sure, with additional archaeological studies, we would certainly find more up and down the trail. Okay, so the story of High Bridge Trail State Park really has to do with the history of transportation. And Daniel did touch on it a little bit, but I want to just sort of dig in a little bit more. So when the settlers arrived in 1607, you started seeing them expand into the Tidewater of Virginia and into throughout the whole coastal plain, north and south from where they landed. And in time, it came to a point where most of the area of the coastal plain below the fall line had been fairly populated. A lot of the tribes had been pushed out to the west, and the colonial settlers really established, again, another agricultural community. A lot of their crops they were selling, sending them back to England or to Europe in general. In time, though, they were running out of land, and they were also rapidly depleting the quality of the soils of the land, and so they needed to move west, which they ended up doing. But this created a challenge. Okay, if the settlers are going to move west into the Piedmont and settle new areas and put new farms and grow new crops, how are they going to get those crops to market? How are they going to sell those crops? And so that's really where the history of transportation here comes in. So while early settlers may have, again, just used fairly primitive means, in time, it was actually George Washington and some of the folks around his era that discussed the development of a canal system. So some of you probably heard of the James River Kanawha Canal System. Well, that was also associated out here with the Upper Appomattox Canal. And you can see that that was built by 1816. It was replaced with a lock and dam system in the 1830s, and it was used really throughout the 1800s as a means to get goods to port. So out here, tobacco was king, so tobacco was the #1 crop. They also produced corn, they produced wheat, they produced legumes, peas and beans and that type of thing. But they had to get it down to Petersburg to get it shipped out. So that's how it was a canal-based system. They used bateau boats, as Daniel mentioned. And the old canal really passed right under what is currently the High Bridge, as well as over towards River Road, closer to Farmville here. So in time, technology improves, and there came a point where it wasn't the most efficient system anymore. Railroads were on the rise, and so folks started looking to replace that older system with the new system of railroads. So I'm going to look at my screen just to get the dates right here, but the Southside Railroad Company was chartered in 1846, and construction began in 1849. And again, the first phase of that was really meant to connect Petersburg all the way to Burkeville. And then the second phase was to connect Burkeville all the way to Lynchburg. And Daniel gave some of the history of how we ended up with some of the, not this straight line, but ended up picking up a lot of the towns, including Farmville and Pamplin. So the construction of the original bridge was completed on 1854. It was a wood superstructure. It used basically masonry abutments, masonry pillars, brick and stone and so forth. And you can still see the remnants of some of that today. And actually in this picture here on the right, those pillars are from the original bridge, and I'll talk a little bit more about that history. But the bridge did suffer significant damage in the Civil War. We'll get to that in a little bit. And so in time, it was renovated a few times. It was upgraded because steel became the way of instead of having a wood superstructure, you would need a steel superstructure. That as technology kept on improving, the weight loads and the needs of the trains kept on increasing. There were several renovations throughout time until finally the decision was made that we actually need to replace this thing. We not being the state park, of course, didn't exist. But a new steel structure was completed in June of 1914. And so again, if you hear us talking about the 1854 bridge, that's the original, or the 1914 bridge, which is the bridge that stands today. Those are the two, and again, that photo shows both of them, the steel on the left and the old one on the right. Now, really interesting stories on the piers. Those one of the reasons why the 1854 bridge had been abandoned was because some of those piers were starting to go bad. Well, one of them had been in the Appomattox River, and that was taken out to basically relieve the blockage of water traffic up and down the river. So that left 19. Well, today there's not 19. Another 6 or so are missing. Well, what happened to them? Well, in World War II, there was a shortage of materials, and so anyway, long story short, some of those ended up being basically salvaged and recycled, and a lot of that brick material from the former piers was utilized in local projects. And in fact, the local furniture company here in Farmville has bricks from those piers from the original High Bridge, so pretty cool. All right, so as Daniel mentioned this already, so I won't detail it too much, but essentially through the 1970s it was used for passenger traffic, including Amtrak, and then it was used up till about 2005, only about 2 decades ago, for traditional freight. But as Daniel mentioned, the time came where this section of the trail, or the railroad, excuse me, was abandoned. And so that set in motion the events that eventually led to the creation of the state park. Now, with that said, because of its historic value, I mean, it is one of the tallest standing bridges out there. It is a Virginia Historic Landmark and a National Register. The National Register of Historic Places also had it listed in about 2008 or so. So again, if you haven't taken the time to look at the old piers, it's definitely worth going. There's a trail from Camp Paradise where you can walk down underneath the bridges, and that's worth your time just to go see it. There's certainly a really neat story there. Now, up and down the trail itself, there's other remnants of the former railroad. Obviously, the trail itself is built on what was the former tracks. But there's also things like there's an old telegraph pole, there's the remnants of the Prospect Depot down at Prospect. Some of the culverts that I mentioned earlier are original, that were from the railroad construction. So we do have a lot of these archaeological resources associated with those former bridges up and down the park, and something that we want to protect. Okay. I'm not going to, you could spend a ton of time on the Civil War. I'm not going to do that, but I just want to mention in brief, as Daniel mentioned earlier, you know, this is in some ways a Civil War park. So at Camp Paradise, Camp Paradise was actually a Civil War camp of Confederate soldiers that was located roughly northwest of the bridge. And they created earthworks on both sides of the bridge to protect it because it was a critical supply line that they wanted to make sure that, you know, they kept safe so they could get goods and services, you know, from the east, from Petersburg. The Camp Paradise itself was a temporary camp made out of log cabins, and there's some pretty interesting stories that go along with that, but there's records of really the soldiers called it Camp Paradise because they enjoyed themselves. Little do they know that the war was really going to come to them, but at that time, you know, they enjoyed even putting on plays and did various productions there. It was their paradise. They hunted, they fished, they did whatever they wanted to while they were hanging out protecting the bridge. But the bridge did end up becoming a major part in the war, and again, the war came to them. So in 1865, the bridge became part of what is now called, by historians, the Appomattox Campaign. So sort of the last days of the retreat of the Army of Northern Virginia under General Lee, being pursued by General Grant. And you can see up here on the slide the various battles. So we also have Sailors Creek Battlefield State Park just down the road to the east. And that was one of the last major battles of the Civil War, which was a huge loss for the Confederates. Battle of High Bridge on April 6th and 7th. The battle was more on the 6th, and at that point the Union tried to destroy the bridge. The Confederates fought them off, and there were a lot of Union casualties as well as Union soldiers taken captive. But ironically, the next day, the Confederates turned around and decided to burn the bridge anyway, after defending it the previous day, and that was, again, to slow the pursuit of Grant's army. There was an associated wagon bridge that was not successfully burnt, which ended up being a critical mistake because it allowed for the passage of those troops. Then in the coming days, April 7th, 8th, and 9th, you had battles at Cumberland Church, Farmville, Appomattox Station, and finally Appomattox Courthouse, and of course we all know that was followed by Lee's surrender on April 9th. So again, who would have thought it at the time, but we know when those soldiers were hanging out in 1864 at Camp Paradise doing their plays and thinking they were in the best place ever, they didn't know it was coming to them, and literally this area from really from Burkeville all the way down to Appomattox Courthouse would play a huge role in the end of the Civil War. So other key resources up and down the park in terms of cultural resources, there are a wide variety of things we wanted to just quickly mention. We have some post-Civil War homesteads, including the Prospect House, and the Folks property also has some remnants. There's 5 known cemeteries. Something about state parks is we're always finding new cemeteries, it seems like, as we come across them. But there are 5 known today. And there's other domestic or cemetery resources that are located literally just outside park boundaries. All right, so we've talked about the physical resources of the park, we've talked about the history, and now we're going to talk a little bit about the natural resources at the park. a lot of Virginia state parks really have, something that really makes it stand out. Here at High Bridge, the cultural resources really are a huge part of the story, but we don't want to leave out the natural resources. We have some other parks that really the natural resources are sort of the prime focus, but they're both important, and we try to find that balance. So the first thing we'll do, just very briefly, is talk a little bit about the abiotic resources. That's the non-living resources at the park, but it's still important for planning purposes. Then we'll get into a little bit of the biotic or the living resources, and then talk about resource management priorities. Okay, so watersheds, about 99% of the area of our park is located within the James River watershed. There's a tiny little sliver of Pamplin that actually drains to the Roanoke in the upper Roanoke watershed. In terms of flood zones, the vast majority of this park is not in the floodplain. That's something that's very important that we consider during planning. As we've seen from Hurricane Helene, even in the most unexpected places, we can get some, pretty bad storms and so forth. However, obviously at the Appomattox River, there's floodplain right there at Camp Paradise, as well as some areas around here at Farmville that are located in the 100 or 500-year floodplain. In terms of soils, we are not going to list them all out. There's about 80 different soils in this park, if you imagine, this is again a roughly 31 mile stretch that makes up High Bridge Trail State Park. The key here is that most of what makes up the trail itself is highly disturbed, highly manipulated, first from the railroad and now from the development of the park. But if you get off the beaten path, again, we have a wide diversity of soils that I would say are mostly dominated by loams and sandy loams. In terms of wetlands, we do have a variety of wetlands that are associated with the river down at Camp Paradise, as well as on the Piney Grove tract, some forested and some shrub wetlands. Ecological cores. So DCR has many divisions. You're talking to two of them tonight, the Division of Planning and Recreation and the Division of State Parks. We have another sister division that's the Division of Natural Heritage, and they look at the sort of rarest species and communities that are out there in Virginia. And one of the things that they do is the Virginia Natural Landscape Assessment, and among other things, that looks at sort of the largest blocks of land in Virginia that are still relatively undisturbed and unfragmented. And they call them the cores, so ecological cores. And they look at those across the state and they rank them in terms of significance all the way from general to outstanding. Well, around Camp Paradise, a large chunk of Camp Paradise is part of a core of outstanding significance for its habitat continuity and its lack of disturbance. The Rochelle Tract is part of, again, a core of high significance. Now, these cores don't know boundaries. Some of it's on the park, some of it is on private land, but it's something we're trying to keep in mind during planning when we make decisions about future development. All right, a little bit about the ecosystems of the park for those who may not be aware, especially if you haven't been to Piney Grove or Rochelle or Camp Paradise and sort of taken a walk or a bike ride in the woods. You may not be quite you may not know as much about these areas as you do about the trail corridor itself. So pine forest. We have currently today about 200 acres of pine forest up and down the trail. Those are divided into various blocks. Some of that is monoculture that was traditional loblolly pine planted probably by previous owners for silvicultural purposes. And then we also have some areas that are a mix of pine and hardwood that in time we would like to see transitioned to native hardwood forests. We have a lot of what we call amazing mixed hardwood forests that are dominated by species like oak and beech and poplar. Again, more your traditional upland hardwood. And I'm going to go high level. We have the slides available, or will eventually online. And so if you were interested in the details, we can go there later. Acidic oak hickory forest. One thing I wanted to mention is this species that you can see in the picture. That is a rare species. And I'm going to explain these codes for a second. Our natural heritage partners, they rank the rarest species and communities in Virginia on a scale of 1 to 5. The G is an acronym for global. The S is an acronym for state. So on the global level, this hoary skullcap plant is relatively secure, but in Virginia, the S, it's the number 2, which means it's very imperiled. So it's an endangered species of Virginia. But that is one species we know of on the park, and again, something that we want to work to protect and foster as possible. Also, some of our ecosystems themselves are very sensitive, and this acidic oak hickory forest is one of those. All right. Just some other things. Again, I'm hitting the highlights here, but Piedmont hardpan forest, we have some areas at the Rochelle Tract that are also known to be very rare on a state level and global as well. And then our Piedmont granitic flat rocks. If you look at those, what it looks like rocks in a field on the picture on the left, that is also a rare system on the global and state levels. So most people may not think about ecosystems all day, but you at least want to make sure you can see some of these plants. So you got hoary skullcap, I already mentioned that in the top left. And you have rattlesnake master, which is on the top right. You have the Virginia false gromwell on the lower right, and the Virginia quillwort on the lower left. So all four of these are sensitive species that are known to grow on the park or very close to the park. And so as we work with our resource manager over here, Carrie, as well as the park staff, these are species that we want to, again, make sure we're keeping in mind and doing what we can to help them thrive and avoid disturbance to them. So in general, resource management at a rail-to-trail park is all about managing invasive species. So invasive species really like disturbed environments. You may not find as many endangered species inside of a giant forest that's hundreds of thousands of acres because it's all relatively undisturbed. There's may not be great vectors or ways for those seeds or berries to spread into the interior of that ecosystem. But when you have a long linear trail like High Bridge Trail State Park is, it makes it really easy for plants to disperse by wind or get picked up by a runner or a biker, or to a seed to be eaten by a bird that flies, a couple hundred meters up the trail and then defecates that seed, right along the edge. That happens a lot. And so it's a constant battle, again, against invasives. Now, we have a relatively small resource management staff, so we do have to make some prioritization. And right now, the priority for High Bridge is working on our woody invasive species. So species like autumn olive, which is Elaeagnus, Ailanthus, or tree of heaven, Paulownia, which is the empress tree or the princess tree. Those are some of the top targets. But we also have a lot of herbaceous, grassy, weedy species. Things like English ivy are out there, Japanese stilt grass, as well as Lespedeza. So those are also important, but maybe on a lesser scale, just because the woodies require so much demand. We have a variety of upland pollinator habitats that are up and down the trail, and we want to manage those as much as we can to keep them going, to keep them free of woody invasives. And then finally, I just mentioned that the Piedmont granitic flat rocks is an ongoing project. That's a rare ecosystem on the global and state levels, but unfortunately the previous owners used it as a trash dump. So it's a long-term project to get that back into what we'd like to see it become. So again, that was a sort of a very high overview of the physical, cultural, and natural resources at High Bridge Trail State Park. If you have any specific questions, we can take those at the end. But for now, I'll turn it back to Josh.
David, thank you very much. So in terms of the next steps, as I mentioned at the beginning of the meeting, there is a public input survey that is currently live. With this state park master plan, we're going to kind of break new ground with this master planning process. Typically, we do in PRR a separate master planning survey, but the Your Comments Count survey is so well known to visitors to the park, and it's something that they're very familiar with, and it gets such a high rate of response typically that we're going to actually open up opportunities for public comment throughout the planning process by completing that Your Comments Count survey. So the survey itself has actually been modified by the consultant that that prepares that for us, so that it includes questions not only about your satisfaction as customers with the existing facilities at the park, but also about what types of facilities perhaps should be added. And that might be something as simple as better signage to direct people to, how many miles it is between access points, or better bathrooms instead of the vault toilets that exist at certain bathrooms, or it can be more significant things. David had mentioned earlier, there's a tract of property called the Piney Grove tract just off of Piney Grove Road that is relatively undeveloped and looks like a good candidate for potentially adding some overnight facilities. But now, as we look at that, we have to be mindful of the fact that we have other state parks in this area that have some of those overnight facilities. So it's really about identifying that niche that High Bridge Trail State Park can occupy. Maybe lodges aren't the best idea, but maybe primitive campsites are, and that kind of thing. So when you fill out that survey, really be thinking about that. What would really enhance the visitor experience for users of this park, and use yourself as those visitors in asking that question. So if there's not a question on there, if there's not a well-tailored question with a set of prepared responses to something that you want to add, feel free to use any open-ended place where you're allowed to just, type at will to identify those things for us, because we do word counts on those fields. We do something called a word cloud, and we look for common usages of terms and phrases that lead us to sort of identify this is what folks are saying by and large about this particular need or this particular thing that they value or connect to at the park. So once again, that's the web link to that location, and there is a QR code on the next slide as well. The next thing we're going to do with that is we're going to compile it, and it gets compiled in a number of spreadsheets and graphs and charts, and that report ultimately gets incorporated into the draft master plan. Sometimes there's information that we want to present in the actual text of the master plan. Sometimes there's information that we want to, like when it comes to everybody's comments, listing everybody's comments out, that we want to leave to like an appendix of the master plan. But just know that if you issue a comment in that survey, there's someone that is going to read that comment and respond to that comment. So I read every single comment that everybody writes multiple times as I'm compiling these survey results to get at the what is the public really telling us about this state park. We're going to use that input and use that summary report in our visitor experience workshop that planning staff and state park staff are going to engage in, I believe, coming up in February. And the reason for that is we want the needs that are identified as part of a later workshop that we do, that's the next step, to be based on the desired visitor experience, and that also to be based on what the public is telling us would enhance their experience. We'll also draft potentially a new purpose statement, new visitor experience themes, and overall the master planning goals. No plan is complete without a set of goals. Aspirational principles that this is what we want the park to be when it builds out. And so we'll develop those, and eventually that will lead to a set of recommendations on developments and improvements at the park to various areas. Because we can't do everything all at once, those will be prioritized in terms of which ones are the most needed for safety, what are the things that we need right now, and what are the things we can kind of wait for, like a phase 2, and what things are going to have to be relegated to phase 3, because while they're important, they're not immediate priority needs of the park. So that results in what's known as a phase development plan and a development map, where you'll basically see a version of this map when we come to the public comment meeting, but it'll have all the proposed developments represented on it, and that will give you a second chance to comment on that at that time. Then we take all those comments and finalize the actual text, the actual draft of the plan that's based on those recommendations. And then when the plan is drafted and when it goes to the Board of Conservation and Recreation for approval, there's another opportunity to comment on the actual plan itself for the public, for those that attend the meeting. So that is basically the process going forward in its simplest, condensed, generalized form. And there's a lot of things that have to happen between now and then, a lot of discussions that take place to get from here to there. But it's overall a fairly rational planning process. We call that in planning pretty rational planning process, where you lead to your final set of recommendations while obtaining public input each step along the way. And so there's the QR code to the to the Your Comments Count survey. There's also the web link up there to the Highbridge Master Planning website. That content will be built out. You'll see more and more information coming out in the weeks to come. But your input really forms the backbone of the planning process that we're going to be going through. And so we want to make sure we get that as much on the front end as possible, while also letting you tell us how we did on the back end of that process. So at this time, if you have any questions that you'd like to ask our panel of folks here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to open it up for questions. Please come up to the lectern so that the recording software can record your comment, and I'm going to turn this around, and then I'm going to go sit back down, and everybody can answer their questions from their own place at the dais, because we are all mic'd up over here. So. But that at this time, we'll engage in comments and questions.
Any comments, questions?
I know someone's got a comment. Come on. This one's a little louder.
Hello. My name is Robert Perrin. My wife is Yvette, and we own a restaurant in Pamplin called Meepaw's Table. First of all, let me say before I go any further is that it's pretty remarkable and impressive what you've accomplished so far. If nobody said thank you, then I'm sure that they have, but I would say thank you for everything you do. I myself am a hiker. I go to the Appalachian Trail twice a year, and I've been on the Highbridge Trail several times, and so I find it very enjoyable, and obviously it's a result of a lot of hard work and blood, sweat, and tears, as they say. One of the things I like to mention, though, is one of the concerns was not only the appreciation for the recreational aspect, but also the economic impact of the Highbridge Trail. Obviously, a restaurant, that's kind of like where I'm kind of leading there. We've been open for about a year, and so we're in Pamplin. We're at the end of the trail, so to speak. And just as an example of where I'm going is that this past week, we had some folks that came down from Pennsylvania. They were riding their bikes on the trail. They got to Prospect. Somebody said, hey, there's a restaurant down in Pamplin. You ought to go ahead and try it. So they rode the rest of the way from Prospect into Pamplin to try the restaurant. As far as I know, they enjoyed the food. So hopefully we'll see them again if they decide to come back down. But one of the things that really kind of rises to the attention, I guess, is that how would anybody know there's a restaurant there unless somebody tells them? And I realize we don't want to disturb the natural aspect of the trail. You don't want billboards on every tree and that kind of thing. But maybe if there was a way where we could communicate some of the highlights of each one of those entry points or access points that you have. So when people get there and they see, a parking lot and they say, well, what's in town or what's there? It may be a simple non-discrete board or something that maybe lists a very short synopsis of what's going on. And like I said, it could be at the access points or somewhere where they cross a road or something to that effect. So I guess what I'm saying is that the community really wants to support this, and obviously, it's very exciting to have that trail, especially come nearby. But there are a lot of commerce and economic opportunities along the trail, which people may be interested in if they only knew. And so I guess I don't have all the answers, but I would just really kind of the suggestion is explore that during the planning phase of how we can communicate to the folks that are visiting from Pennsylvania or wherever they come from that, hey, there's a great spot over there. Maybe you ought to check it out. So that's it. All right. Thank you.
Anybody else have a comment or a question? If not, there will be, oh, did you want to? Yeah, come on.
My name is Ronald McCullough. My wife and I, my family members have rode this trail a few times, and he's right. It'd be nice maybe to have a QR code or something at different points saying, hey, if you're at Farmville, you can do this, or if you're going to be wherever you're going to be, you know, have in general, there may be some civic activities going on. Maybe you might want to join in on, and just to let you know, you're just not national recognized. I got family members over in Holland that are coming over this next year, so to want to ride the trail. So. Yep.
My name is Sarah Hamlet Blackwell, just to get that there on the record. One of the things that we had discussed in the town of Pamplin to offer towards the park, if they were interested in part of their planning process, was that we do have municipal water and sewer in town, and we've already kind of looked at that from a council perspective and are willing to donate that to have a flush toilet at the parking lot in Pamplin. So that is something that I kind of wanted to make sure I got on the record, that it is, on offer to the parks, with the town kind of absorbing the monthly water and sewer fees. So.
Hi, my name is Mickey Creighton. I'm a student at Longwood University. I am also an employee at a local park owned by Hampton City in Virginia. And I had a question. We're called Bluebird Gap Farm, and a lot of our guests come to the farm to observe wildlife. And it's one of their favorite things to do. People will come and log different type of wild birds coming in, different reptiles, amphibians. So my question is, while you guys are planning to make changes and improve certain aspects of the park, how do you guys plan to, I guess, not disturb the local wildlife to ensure that locals can still observe them kind of in their natural habitat? Or I guess my question is, the best way to observe wildlife is to kind of leave them undisturbed. So how do you guys plan on ensuring that they stick around?
I guess I'll speak in this. So part of what David had explained and probably didn't get completely understood is those G4, those areas. We have areas that are along the park, and because this is an interesting park because it's 31 miles, right, or 32 miles, we have all those areas along the way. The good thing and nice thing about DCR, it doesn't just represent state parks and planning and recreation. We also represent Division of Heritage. And that division keeps us straight. And what I mean by that is they're not going to let us do anything that impacts wildlife, that impacts certainly the bird corridor when it comes to seasonal movement across, as well as every other species that's out there, both plant, insect, animals. So I would tell you, because I'm usually the one building the things, that we have the most aggressive. And I would say, because we are a state park, and because we are a state park, we protect, we preserve all of those species, as well as the natural, cultural, historic resources. And so for us, I know it's not just take my word for it, but look at the other 43 state parks. This will be as well one of them, where we're protecting those areas. We may not show them to the public, because sometimes we don't want to show areas sensitive to the public, because then they come in and destroy them. So we protect them on layers behind the scenes, and then when we propose those future build-outs in the next meeting, if you come, we'll be proposing them in the not sensitive areas, not the sensitive ones. So usually we get questions and say, well, we wanted a parking lot here, why can't we have it? And sometimes we are coy with why. We'll say, well, there's a sensitive resource, without telling everybody what that resource is, just because we're trying to protect it. But that goes for all of the species as well. And so we put buffers even around those areas. So if we know there's an owl habitat, or bats, the brown-nosed bat, we protect these areas, and then we put 200 and 300-foot buffers. Now, we recognize, like birds, they fly, right? That you can't necessarily make the buffer the entire park. But we work with our sister partners to make sure they're working with those corridors, as well as Department of Wildlife Resources. So they're one of our helpers as well, and behind the scenes on master plans.
Okay, that answered my question perfectly. Thank you.
Just to add one thing, that also goes for the historic resources too. So all of those various things, I mean, some of the historic resources, obviously the bridge itself are things that we want to preserve, protect, and feature, but there's some other sensitive cultural resources, including some of the off the beaten path cemeteries and so forth that we will, seek to avoid, public usage of, so.
And I'll add, you can come up while I'm talking. I'll add to that we have multiple points of this too. So we consider that during the planning process. We consider, as Kelly said, the layers and where things are located. Then as Kelly's shop gets closer to building, there's evaluations that go on as we get more specific of where things go. And then as we manage, we have our own processes that we evaluate things as we go through management as well.
Hi, Ann Ligon. I'm a neighbor, Friends of High Bridge. I don't promote the bears, just for comment. I see entirely too many bears in the trail and in my house, so you don't need to do anything extra for the bears. Okay, all right. Well, they weren't here 20 years ago, and when we retired down here, it was like, wait a minute, I did not plan on bears. Why did we have, so anyway, I would like to promote when you're increasing things in the trail to increase staffing. And I would love to see the Firefly Festival be 2 weekends, not one. But staffing is a huge problem, right? Yeah. You what? Thank you so much. Well, I think it'd be fun if we could even extend it to Sunday night, but that's just me. I just think it's one of the more unique things about the trail, and it's one of the things that I cannot get local people to come. Oh, we see fireflies in our backyard, and it's just so difficult to bring. So that's my advocacy. I would like to see that expanded, but that will require more staffing, because I know we pull from all the different parks in order to try and pull it off.
Yes, on that, Ann, thank you so much. So Ann was our president and still of the Friends Group, and still.
I have one of the rocks from a culvert that failed. That
do.
was my prize for being president.
It was.
It was great.
It was legally obtained.
Legally obtained. They delivered it. I have it in a prominent spot. It has a little brass plaque. Anyway.
Absolutely. So for anybody here that doesn't know, so our premier event is the Firefly Festival that takes place in June. So it's one of those things, and to your point, it's something that we're constantly looking at, and as we grow, we do change, and so it's not out of the possibility to look at it for 2 weekends. Like you said, it's a big pull. It's about 21 staff and volunteers to put it on per night. So, and we want to be mindful of not burning out our staff and volunteers, because we have about 850 people show up each night on it, and so, including this gentleman. And the tickets sell out. They sell out every year. Yeah. So we, in the past, it has only been on the Friday and Saturday previous to Father's Day. We did move it this year, this coming year, because the moon was our enemy last year, we found out. So the night train race is going to get the full moon, and the Fireflies are going to get no moon until later that evening. So.
And just a quick addition, as part of the master plan, there will be a staffing plan associated with that. So at our second meeting, we'll present that staffing plan.
Good evening. Doug Stanley, County Administrator for Prince Edward County. My apology for being late. My son's academic team meet went on a little bit long at the high school. Appreciate the opportunity to just say a few words. Appreciate the opportunity to partner with the park. Prince Edward is blessed to be, I think, the only county in Virginia that has all our part of 3 state parks within its borders. Tourism and is a big part of our economic development strategy. We are also going through a comprehensive planning process right now where we're taking a good hard look at, I'll say, visual impacts of off-site properties on the trail, I used to work in Warren County, Virginia, and there we had Skyline Drive, and we were very cognizant of the visual impact of what was going on off the park that would have from visitors that were driving along Skyline Drive and looking down. And I'd say, you know, we're cognizant of the people that are on the trail and how they're not going to come here if they're walking past full residential developments or solar farms or everything else right up against the trail. So I think one of the things that we're looking at doing in the comp plan is trying to make sure that some of those view sheds are protected. So we want to partner as much as we can. We're certainly excited about the visitor center and look for other opportunities, other properties that could maybe be added to the park. We're also, as Mr. Jordan knows, Prospect, we've got a former rail station out there. I'd love to see, you know, maybe just a restroom or shelter type facility there that could provide refuge for people on the trail, if nothing else. We missed an opportunity to revamp that a few years ago, and you know, I think there's still an opportunity moving forward, so I'd like y'all to consider that. But we appreciate the partnership. We really need to work together to make sure that we protect the golden goose and you know, continue to build on that relationship. So thank you.
And Doug, thank you so much. Like we do appreciate the counties, but especially with the bulk of the park being in Prince Edward, we do have a good working relationship with you, and we appreciate the help that you've given us, and I think we're good for each other, so we appreciate that.
Very good.
Yeah.
I had one further comment. Sarah Hamlet Blackwell, again from the town of Pamplin. I guess I had always thought of the park more as, I guess, as like an ecological type of conservationism. But having listened to and you know, reviewing what was up on the screens, you know, there is a big cultural component to it as well. And, you know, thinking about, you look at other state parks like, you know, First Landing and all of those that really pull that aspect into it. One of the things that is pretty much just very adjacent to the end of the park in Pamplin, and I would like to, I guess, maybe plant the seed if there is any possibility in the future of the 30-year plan, would be the possibility of incorporating the Pamplin Pipe Factory, as it's been on the National Historic Register since 1980, I believe it was. And has been currently held by the Southern Conservancy. But would be wonderful, I think, because it is kind of congruent with the time frame of the trail and when the railroad came through. I think it started 1879 was when it first started making pipes, and at one time was the largest pipe factory in the world, which I think is just crazy and amazing to me that anything in Pamplin could be the largest in the world at any point in time. But just, you know, just sitting here listening to that got me thinking about ways of, you know, maybe incorporating that, because it literally is right across the street from the current trail beginning. Yeah, the western terminus. So I just, like I said, got to thinking and wanted to plant that seed. So again, thank you guys so much for your time.
Thank you, Sarah.
Just a comment to add on that one. So we have an archaeologist on our team that has been doing a lot of sort of cultural resource background work, and that's actually one of the things that she dug into was the pipe factory. So appreciate you bringing it up. She did work on clay pipes and in her own PhD work, so she was really excited to dig into that. But it's definitely something that we've kept in mind, and as we go forward, especially with visitor experience discussions, it's a story or a theme that we'll look more into.
Well, I do have the keys if she would like to do a tour.
Yeah.
And I have some contacts with the Conservancy that I can put her in touch with.
And she's been in contact with Kelly, but I think geek out is the term used when she saw it in real life. Come on up, Craig.
I'm coming up to this microphone, maybe against my better judgment, but I really, I'd like to kind of visit the core of the center of gravity of our park, which is High Bridge itself. I remember the first master plan meeting, and I remember Joe Smith said, "What about High Bridge?" Because it seemed to have fallen through the cracks. But we got the bridge rehabilitated in 2012, and that project lasted about 7-8 years. Just in the early part of our 20s, our roaring 20s of the 2020s, we had the whole thing refurbished again, and I can imagine, I can say with some confidence that it probably isn't going to make it through the rest of the 20s. It may have to be redone again, and I would hope that the master plan would look into High Bridge itself and maybe come up with a sustainable, durable design for the decking, because it's so disruptive when the whole thing has to be torn up and redecked. The public is very disappointed and put off, and it inconveniences everything, and it grinds our economic engine to a halt when that happens. So that's my 2 cents.
Just as a way just to make sure that I get a list of everybody that's in attendance. I know some folks came in a little bit late. There is a sign-up sheet here circulating around. If you haven't had an opportunity to sign in yet, please do so that we know you were here and we can communicate with you if need be. If you want us to, we won't solicit you, don't worry. Are there any other questions or comments? If not, this will conclude the presentation part of the meeting, but I plan to linger, and I know, Daniel, you'll be lingering as well. So if you have questions for maybe those who are not as good at public speaking or don't like to ask them in public, we'll be here to answer those questions as well and discuss that with you. But thank you. Thank you for having us here.
Yeah, that's fine.